All right, welcome everyone. We're gonna get started at 3:05. All right, it's 3:04. I'm gonna get started in a brief second. So, okay, it's 3:05. Let's get started. So, we're gonna go over classes, variables, review. Okay, so last time we touched on classes. They're really important, and today we're gonna review that a bit and give you a project and introduce a new concept. So, without further ado. What are they? So classes are a sort of template which can be copied and filled out. So a copy of a class is known as an instance. Classes can be used as a custom variable type as seen in later examples. So it's a lot to take in, but basically they're kind of a fill in the blank. They have blanks, you fill them in, and you can, the class is like the template for the fill in the blank, and you can create different filled in versions that are called instance. We can also use them as custom variable types. Okay, so here's an example of a class. Class dog, name equals blank, gender equals blank, breed equals blank, age equals 0, size equals 0. So a purely conceptual view of this is the class dog. It has a name, it has a gender, has a breed, has an age, has a size. All dogs have this, right? And so we can fill in the blanks, but this is the template here. So there's nothing actually filled in, if that makes sense. So let's take a look at that real quick. So we're going to create a class real quick. So class, this keyword class here tells them that, yeah, we're making a class. The computer knows what the next thing I'm going to type is the name of the class. Capitalize the first letter. It's convention. It won't break if you don't do it, but it's so commonly used that it's basically a necessity. We're going to call this dog. You can use parentheses. You don't need them. Okay, so class dog. So what are some things that a dog might need? What are some properties that every dog has? And put that in chat. Something that all dogs have. Breed, sure. Breed. Breed equals blank. They also have, say, age equals and size equals. So note how I'm putting in placeholder values. This obviously the age isn't 0, the size isn't 0, and the breed isn't nothing. But I'm using these as placeholder values to signify, yeah, I have a blank spot here. Okay, so now that what are some other things? Age, breed, size, name equals. Okay, so now we have our class here. Remember, class, the name of the thing, capitalize it, and then colons. So we're going to create an instance. We're going to fill in the blanks here. So first thing we do is we get a new copy of this. So we say dog1 equals dog. And see how it's kind of like a function? So basically, it has to be exactly the same as the name of the class, and then parentheses afterwards. So this creates a copy of this template. And so breed is going to be blank, age is going to be blank, or age is going to be 0, size is going to be 0, name is going to be quotations. And then we can say breed equals dog1.breed, sorry. Dog1.breed equals husky. And then we can say, oops, that shouldn't be indented. Dog1.age equals 5, dog1.size equals 3, dog1.name equals 2. So I'm putting in dots here because it basically says, whose is this? It says breed. Okay, whose is this? Oh, it's dog1's breed. Okay. Whose age? Dog1, it's dog1's age. Because normally you can't, if I were just to type size here, it doesn't know what that is because it's inside of this, and that's hidden. Think of it, so the dot allows us to actually go inside a specific instance. So if I were to run this, and then I printed dog1.name, what do you think it would print? Right. The name is not 2. It should definitely not be 2. It should be, right, so it'll print the name. So it'll print, let's call him Wolf. All right. And we print this, and it prints out the name. So now let's say we make a different dog. Dog2 equals dog. Dog2, dog2, dog2. And we can set these to different values, and they will be completely different than dog1's values. So we can say dog1.breed equals, we can say German Shepherd. We can say age is 7, size is 4, dog's name is Ace. And so print dog1.name, this will print dog1's name. But if we put print dog2.name, what will this print? Anyone? Okay, it's going to print Ace because Ace is dog 2's name. Does that make sense? Any questions? I'm going to assume not. Okay, so we run this wolf Ace. So here's an example template. Okay, so we have our little template here on the left hand side: dogs, name, gender, string, breed, age, size. Right? And the types of data there are. So this is string, this is a string, this is a string, this is an int, this is an int. Okay? And so we can create new instances from these here and here. And so they're different, but they have the same categories of properties. They both have names. It's just they have different names. They both have gender. It's just they have different genders. Okay? So does that make sense so far? Okay, moving on. So class dog. So name equals blank, gender equals blank. And so we did something like this a minute ago. I just want you to take a moment, look at the syntax, note how we make the class in particular. Any questions about this kind of thing? But real quick, I'm gonna go over it again. Class, so class tells it that the next thing will be the name of the class. It's dog. Dog is D and dog is capitalized. Colon, and then we give it the variables that it's going to have. And then when we create this, dog1 equals dog1.name. So it says, okay, I have a copy of this fill in the blank here. Dog1, let's fill in that blank. Dog1.name equals Ace. Okay, so that fills it in, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, these data types have to match. You can see 0 and 5, both ints. 8 and 0, both ints. String and string, string and string, right? They have to be the same. And one last example class real quick. So we have class bird. Species equals blank, name equals blank, weight equals 0. And so this is the template, okay? When we say bird1.species equals duck, it prints out duck. Now, suppose we printed out bird.species instead of bird1.species. What do you think that would print? Anyone? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so class bird species equals. Okay, so suppose I have bird1, bird1.name. Bird1.name equals Donald. It needs to be in string. Oops. Bird2.name equals, sorry, bird1.age equals 10. Bird1.species equals duck. And it does not like this. That's because I haven't actually created bird1. So I need to bird1 equals bird. Okay, so let's say I call, yikes, looks like I'm having a little bit of internet connectivity problems. I'll just reload this real quick. But in the meantime, let's go over what should happen. I run this. Bird1 equals bird. Okay, so if I print bird.species, it's gonna go look here. It's gonna say species. Okay, that's blank. That's gonna print out bird.species, which is, oops, that should be capitalized, which is blank. So it's gonna print blank, right? It doesn't print anything. But if I were to say print bird1.species, then that's going to go in and it's going to say bird1. Okay, bird1 is this class, or sorry, this variable. You go look inside bird1, bird1.name equals Donald, cool, bird1.age equals 10, bird1.species equals duck. Oh, okay. So it's going to say bird1.species is duck, and it's going to print that. And there we go. Does that make sense? Anybody need any clarification, anything? Okay, moving on. Lists and classes. We can use lists as a very handy way to keep track of classes. So for example, this code here, allows us to quickly print out every dog name in a list of dogs. So dogs equals brackets, dogs.append dog1, dogs.append dog2, for I and dogs, print I.name. Okay, so let's break this down. Dogs is a list, okay? We add it on dog1 to the end, add on dog2 to the end. So now it has dog1 and dog2 in the list. Then it goes for I and dogs, print I.name. So it goes, okay, I and dogs. What does that mean? Let's start looking at dogs. That goes and let's see. First thing is dog1. Okay, so I equals dog1, print dog1.name, and it prints dog1's name. It goes, okay, next, I, okay, I is the second thing in dogs. Goes, oh, okay, that's dog2. Print dog2.name, and it prints out dog2's name. And so it goes on and goes through the entire list until it prints out every dog's name. So let's give an example of that. Let's see, this guy's 5 bird 2.species equals eagle. Okay, so now I can create I'm going to create a list here, okay? So we're going to say birds equals blank list. This is a blank list we're creating. I do birds.append bird1. And this slaps on bird1 to the end. So now it's one item long. Birds.append bird2. Now this is 2 items long. And now finally we go for I in birds. So this basically goes through birds, and for each bird in it, it does something. So we're going to say print bird1 dot name. Sorry, dot name. Okay, any questions? Any confusion? Okay, what do you think this is going to print out? Anyone? Okay, it's going to print out Donald, then Clifford, right? It goes bird1's name, because that's first in the list. So it goes I in birds. I, what's the first thing in birds? Goes here, takes a look. Oh, it's bird1. Okay, prints bird1.name. That's Clifford. Or sorry, Donald. Goes to I. Okay, second thing in the list. Bird2. Okay, so bird2 in birds. Print bird2.name. Bird2's name is Clifford. So it goes Donald, Clifford. And Donald Clifford, like so. So here's some practice problems. We are going to create a cat class that takes in name, age, cuteness, and size, and create 3 instances of the cat class and give them name, age, cuteness levels, and sizes. Cool. So let's do that real quick. So class cat equals, or not equals, colon. Class says the next thing is cat, and then class says that the next thing is the class name, which is cat. Then we go on from here. So we say we wanted, I believe it was name, age, cuteness, size. So name, that is not what I want. Name equals blank. Age equals 0. Cuteness equals 0. And size equals 0. Okay, so now it says create 3 instances of the class and give them names, ages, cuteness levels, and sizes. Cool. So how do we create an instance of a class? Well, we do cat whatever. Let's change it up a bit. Lion equals cat. Okay, and that creates a new cat template, and we fill it out. Lion.name equals what's a good name? Leo. Lion.age equals 10. Lion.cuteness equals like 3. And size, lion.size equals 10. Okay, and then we can have other cats too. So let's say house cat 1 equals cat. House cat 1.name equals Meowth. House cat 1.age equals 5. House cat age cuteness equals, let's say, 7, and house cat 1 size equals 4. And finally, the last one, let's say, let's do some kind of cat. Let's say cheetah equals cat. Cheetah dot name equals Lulu. Cheetah dot age equals 5. I don't know why I keep hitting 4 when I say 5. Cheetah dot cuteness equals, let's say it's a solid 5. And then cheetah dot size equals, let's say, 7. Okay, so we've created 3 instances. We filled in 3 fill in the blanks here. And we have 3 instances of different types of cats. So cat, we have a lion, a house cat, a cheetah. Okay, and then we're going to create a class that represents a person, then makes a list of 5 unique people. Can you see my screen right now? I just want to make sure. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, cool. So we're going to go through, we're going to make a person class person. And we're going to have a few things. Name equals blank, age equals blank. Should be a number. Height equals blank. And we let's have some fun facts. And emotion equals blank. Okay, so then let's create some instances of these. So we're going to create 5 unique people. So Lincoln equals a new person. Lincoln dot name equals Lincoln. Crazy, I know. Lincoln dot age equals, gosh, I don't know how old he is. Let's say 42. Height he was 6 feet, so that's roughly what? That's 72 inches. 6 feet. He was probably a little taller than that now I remember. So that should be height. This should be a number, shouldn't it? So this should be 72. And then Lincoln dot emotion equals serious. Okay, and then we're going to create 5 unique people. So a little bit of copy and paste never hurt anyone. And so we can fill these out. There's a shortcut to not having to create so many of these kind of chunks of code that we'll show you in a bit. Okay. So we're gonna, let's say Jefferson. Jefferson.name equals Jefferson. I know this is a little monotonous. We really want to make sure that you understand the concepts of the actual presentation. Like we want to make sure and drill them in. So we want to make sure that you can understand this and also do it yourself. So Jefferson, age 30. I don't know how tall he is. Let's say 60, because I think he was short, maybe, and happy. And we keep on going down. Let's say George. I'm just naming U.S. presidents. It's just an exercise. George. Oh, let me capitalize this one. So note how I have to change the dot, or what the dot is referring to each time. Oh my god. Cannot spell today. Age. I think he died at 70. Let's put that. He was like, what, 5'11", so that's, what, 71 inches. George emotion equals somber. And we keep on going down the line. JFK equals person. JFK.name is John F. Kennedy. JFK.age equals 40. JFK.height equals, I don't know how tall he was either. How tall was he? Let's say 5 feet. So 65, 5 feet 5. Happy. And so we keep on going down. We fill out these. They're like fill in the blanks, right? So, what's another president that we Roosevelt. I'm not sure if that's how you spell it right. That's okay. Okay, so that's 5 unique people. To recap, you need to fill in the blank for each one, and just probably, if I run this, hopefully it doesn't give me an error. So now I can create a list of presidents and whatnot I could print. Yeah, so that's number 2 complete, and then create a class that represents a robot with 3 variables that represents length, width, and height. Okay, class keyword tells you name is coming next. Robot has length 0, width 0, height 0. Okay, then we can create do all sorts of things. So robot 1 equals robot dot length equals 5, robot dot width equals 1, robot dot height equals 10. I'm not sure why it'd be so skinny. Maybe it's, maybe it's just a giant panel or something. And these all need to be robot 1s, not robots. And so maybe it's just a giant panel or something. But we create the class, and we have robot 1 equals robot. And then we fill in the blanks. Okay. I'd like everybody to, we're going to start doing independent problems. So let me know when you guys are done. This might take a bit of time, so stick with it. And yeah. And as always, feel free to ask one of us if you need help. Okay, how's everybody coming along so far? Time. It's okay if you've made it past 1 and 2, but you haven't made it to the challenge problem. It's not expected that you will. It's not expected that you will get it, but 1 and 2 I would like you guys to get. So anybody, how close is everybody to being finished with 1 and 2?
Can you guys type in chat how close you guys are to being finished?
All right, great. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing your progress with everybody, it's perfectly acceptable to just private message one of us. Okay, how's everybody coming along now? All right, great job to everybody who's finished. I'm gonna give it a few more minutes. You guys can start working on the challenge problem. I'm gonna give you 3 more minutes, and then we should move on. Okay, I'm gonna. Is anybody stuck on any problems? Because if you are, please message one of the Paly Robotics members, and they can help. But I'm gonna move on now, and we're moving on to my colleague Vedant's section. Vedant, let's go.
Yes, good colleague. I shall begin soon. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so now, other than fields and variables inside of classes, classes can also have functions inside of them. So you can, when they're in a class, functions can execute specific tasks, like modifying the variables within the class. So if there is a class called student, which has a grade variable, they can have a function inside of that class, which then increments the grade and can be called outside of the class on an instance and change the grade by 1. So functions can be used for things like that, like editing things, and they can also be used to retrieve variables if you want to do that sort of thing, and they can be used to gain outside parameters and add them to variables, or use variables inside of the class for other operations. So to define one, you would do it like any other function, except there are a couple exceptions. So you're gonna have your def keyword, and you're gonna have your function name, and you're gonna have your parameters, colon, and then you're gonna tab in and have your stuff. But there are a couple different things. So first thing you might spot is there's this weird parameter right over here. Can you guys see my mouse cursor?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so if you see over here, there's this weird thing called self. What is self? It's not italicized like regular parameters, right? So this self keyword in just functions within classes has to be the first parameter. It's going to be a bit special though, because it might be a parameter. You don't have to give a value to it. You should not give a value to it. And you also use this self keyword if you want to access variables inside of this class. So you can't just put age to access this variable over here. You have to put self.age. to change it or access it. These can still take parameters after the self, but this self keyword has to be there first. Just know that the self keyword pretty much allows the function to get the class's data. So the instance that's calling the function's data. So like its variables, its functions, things like that. So you have to use that, and you have to remember to do self.variable name. I'll show you this in an example in a sec. So to call a method outside of the function, outside of the class, you're going to need to create your instance first, right? So you have your dog class, and over here we can set dog's age to 6, and then we can call dog.growOlder. So you'll see that growOlder has the 2 parameters, self and amount, and it'll change age by amount. But over here, you only need to call the 1 parameter because self does not need to be called as a parameter, only the parameters after that. So we're giving amount as 5 and changing dog's age by 5. So in the end, you'll get 11. So remember to call your function by referencing the instance and then using your dot, like in dot notation, to access a variable. But this time you're using it to access a function and you're calling it like another function anywhere else, except you have to have the instance's name and the period before that. Then when you need to, now you can also call other functions inside the class. Actually, before this, let's just go over a small example, right? So let's say, oh, I guess I'm having some connection problems. Uh-oh, REPL. Oh, weird. It's able to run and I cannot change. Let me try to create a new REPL. Sorry about that. REPL can be a bit weird sometimes. So, okay, so let's create a new class. If you guys want to go with me, you guys can. It might be helpful for you just to see how this stuff works. It's not a practice problem yet, but it might help you as we go. So let's say we have a horse. Okay, we want to give it a name equals to change. And we'll give it an age. So then what we can do is inside of here, we can create our def keyword, and then we can have our function name. Let's say that we create this name as change horse name. So this will change the name of the horse. And when you have your parameters, you have to put the self keyword. So there has to be that self. And then what we want to do is we want to create a parameter for which name we want to change it to. So when we're calling the function, we're going to give this value into the function and it'll be used as a variable. So let's say, let's call it name underscore to change. So that'll be the name that we change our name to. Then we'll put in our colon and return to the next line. Then what we'll do is to access our variable, I cannot just do name. It'll give me an error because name is not technically, it thinks that name isn't defined. Even though it's here, it doesn't really have access to that. What you have to do is call the instance, so self, call this class. So that references the class that we're in right now, and then do name. So now you have access to this function, you have access to the name, and you have access to the age. So we can do name, self.name, and then we can change it to name to change. So now we'll get, now if we call this function, right, so let's create an instance first. So let's call him pony. And we'll call it a horse class. So we'll make our class capital to match the name, and then we'll put our parentheses there. We'll change ponies. Instead of having to change the name, I guess, we can set pony's age to 3. Let's set whoops, that's my bad. You have to do, instead of not the parentheses, you have to do dot equals 3. So pony.age, we're accessing the age variable by getting the instance and then setting it to 3. And then we can set pony's name to pony. And then right now what we can do is over here, we can access pony, and other than variables, we'll also have this change horse name function here. Also, to autocomplete, you can press tab or enter. I think tab works or enter works. And then I can do that, and it'll give me these two, it'll show me that there's these 2 parameters here. there's self, and there's name to change. So self does not count, but name to change is a parameter that you actually have to enter. So if I gave two parameters, it would give me an error. So let's say I gave it 0 and Pony's new name. If I ran this function, it should give me an error. So it should take, it only wants one argument. It says that it takes 2 arguments, but you can think of it as one because the self keyword counts as an argument, but it's automatically passed through the function. So you only have to give the arguments for the ones that are not self. So we can give Pony's new name and no self keyword. And if we change the horse's name and print Pony's name before and after the change, it'll first you'll have Pony and then you'll have Pony's new name because the change horse name is called, accesses the name and then changes it to the parameter that we've given in. So like that's just the gist of how you can use functions. So other than just having that, you can also have multiple functions in your class, and you can use functions interchangeably inside of your class. So if I have 2 functions, such as in this dog class, which has the grow older function, if I added an increment age function, which changed the age by 1, I could also call that in the grow older function. So this takes in the amount and calls self.incrementAge the amount of times that the amount variable is due to this for loop over here. So it'll run an amount times, oh my bad, and then it'll call increment age. So we can show that over here. So over here we can say, let's call this change horse name and age, right? We can put in amount age to change. Oh, amount age change. And then what we can do is we can create another function, just like the one in the dog class, to increment the age, right? And we have to have the self keyword first. And because this has no parameters, when we're just incrementing by 1, we can just leave the self parameter there. And we can just call self.age plus equals to 1. So that'll change it by 1. Then what we can do is we can create a for loop. Just does not matter. It's just a random variable I'm creating for the for loop. And then we'll call our range function. So it'll generate a value between 0 and our amount to age change. So that'll give us the amount. So let's say we put in 5, it'll give us 0 through 4, and it'll call the for loop 5 times. Then we can increment the age. We can do self.incrementAge, and it'll call that function and increment our age 5 times if amount age changes 5. It can be anything we want it to, and it'll set age to that value. So because this is not the same value, because I changed the function's name, I have to change it down here too. So this will set it to Pony's new name, and it'll change the age to, let's say 7. And over here, we can just like delete these because we're already setting them inside of the function, right? And then it'll, if we also print Pony's age, this will change its age and change the name. Another thing to remember is that you cannot just call these functions inside of here. It'll give you an error because you cannot call the functions, you just can't call them inside of the white space. So you have to call them outside in the instance. We'll have a fix for that later, but that comes later. Then you can also not, so if I define a function out here, let's call it do something. And it's just a regular function, so no self keyword. And then I just print do something inside of this function. If I have it out here, I cannot use it inside of the class. So do something, it won't give you an error right now, but if you run the function, if you run it, then it'll say that do something is not defined inside of the class. So you can't do something inside of the class. You can't use methods defined outside the class, inside of the class, and you can't use methods defined inside the class, outside the class. So if I just called change horse name and age, it'll give me an error because that's defined in here and can't be used out here. So class functions and variables are within it unless you create an instance to call those. So those are just things to remember. Next up, let's just go through some other info. So you have to remember that the self keyword in functions is something that's required, but it's not a parameter. You have to give all the values for all the parameters, but the self keyword doesn't really count. So it can just be there and you don't have to give it a value. Then the self keyword gives the function the data of an instance of the class. So it'll give the variable values and the functions that the instance has. That's how it's able to get its values without, so if we just call it, so that's why you need the self keyword. You can also have to remember that you can't use functions and variables created outside the class inside the methods of the class, and you can't use methods inside the class outside the class. It won't give you an error for the one you use methods and functions and variables that are defined outside the class inside of it, but it will give you an error. It won't give you an error, but it will give you an error during when you run your code. So now we're going to go on to before we do this, do we have any questions on this stuff? Any questions? You can type it in chat, and you can also say it out loud if you want to. Okay. If there are no questions, you can also ask questions to anybody with the Paly Robotics tag. Either way, if there are no questions, I'm going to continue onward. And we're going to go through the special function. So this special function might make your lives a bit easier, but it's not required for you to use. So it's called a constructor, and it's a function that's called at the start when an instance is created. So right as you create, let's say this dog right here, that function will be called. And it's called a constructor, or you can call it your init method. So it has this special name that you have to name it that for it to be called at the start, underscore underscore init underscore underscore. And it's like any other function within the class. So you have your self keyword, you have parameters, and you have your stuff to set variables. So this code right here does the same as this, but when you're calling the constructor, when you're calling when you're creating the instance, you don't have to make these two lines where you're setting the age and the name, because they'll be done within the init function. So I'll show you how to call a class, how to create a class when you have the init function right here. So when you have your init function, you have these two parameters right here, and when you call the class, those parentheses, they might have seemed useless before, but now they'll house the parameters of the init function. So over here, age and name, they'll be defined as 5 and spot. So then they'll be passed into self.age and self.name, and that means that the dog's age will be 5 and the dog's name will be spot. So what it does is that it allows you to skip all the lines defining the variables after you create the instance, and it can just be done within that one line. And also the init function will allow you to call functions at the start when the class is created. So you don't have to because you can't put them in the white space, but because the init function is technically a function, you can still put them inside of the init function. So I'll show you an example right here. So instead, on this horse, right, instead of having the name and age over here, we can create our def underscore underscore init underscore underscore have self, and then let's create a new, let's put our parameters, right? So let's call them name, and then let's call it age. So these are our two parameters, and then we'll put our colon, we'll tab in, and we'll do stuff with them. So when you're defining variables in here, you still have to do self dot. So we'll create self dot name, and we'll set it to name. And we'll set self dot age, and we'll set it to age. These are still creating completely new variables. It's just that you have the self dot in front of it. So it's just creating those variables like that. So they'll be used within the class just like the variables that you would have created up here. Then what we can do is when we're creating the class, what we'll have to do is we can change the name to 6. No, not to 6. We'll change the name to Harry Potter, and we'll change its age to 17. Then instead of calling this function right here, we can just delete this function, and this will work out. So if I run this, it will give me Harry Potter and 17 for Pony's age and name. So this function is called with the parameters that I put inside of this when I call the class, and it's creating the class with those values. So other than just do that, you can also do a bit more special stuff with this. So what I can do is I can also call in functions that I've defined here inside of the init function. So I can call in self.incrementAge over here. So then what I can do is I can give it an age, and it will add to that age by 1 because increment age adds by 1 to the age. So then if I do this, right, I should get 18 instead of 17. And I do. So you can call functions inside of the constructor, and they'll run at the start. So those are the cool things you can do with it. It makes your code shorter, and it makes it allows you to do a bit more stuff than if you didn't have it. But it's not the biggest deal for you right now, and you don't have to use it. It'll be easier for you if you do, but you don't have to. We recommend you do though. So in theory, you've been using constructors this entire time. When you put your parentheses, you are calling a constructor. You just haven't like redefined. It's just a constructor with nothing inside of it. So it has no changes and no arguments, and it won't change anything in your class. But that's just a fun fact. So before the practice problems, any question on constructors? They might be a bit more confusing than the other stuff than the other functions that we've had. Yeah, you can type them in the chat and do stuff like that. After this, we're going to go over these practice problems. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you don't have any questions, but if you do, just privately message a counselor. So the first thing we're going to have to do, the first practice problem we're going to do, I want you guys to whip out REPL. So I want you guys to open up REPL and message the chat when you've done it. While we do that, I'll explain this problem. So we're going to create a phone that has a list of apps on it, and that list of apps and that days passed since the phone was purchased and the weight of the phone. So we're going to create a constructor which allows you to initialize the list, the days passed, and the weight. We're going to create a method that increments the days since the phone was purchased, so it increases that value. We're going to create another two methods that allows you to add and remove apps to the phone. So we're going to use that by doing list.append and list.remove. Okay, so yeah, I'll give you guys 2 or 3 more minutes to open up REPL. Just message the chat when you guys are ready. Okay, so we're gonna start in another minute. Okay, we're gonna start right now. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create our constructor that has our phone in it. So I want you guys to follow along with me. So let's start with our class phone, right? Then what we'll do is we'll create our constructor. So we'll put our def keyword, and then we'll do underscore init underscore, and that'll start our initializing function. And then we'll put in our self keyword, and then we'll start with our args. So this phone is gonna have a list of apps, an integer for the days past, and a float for the weight. So we'll have our phone apps. So we'll create, let's just call it apps, and then we'll call days since purchase, and then we'll call it, we'll call the last one weight. Then what we'll do is we'll have our colon, press enter, and start defining these. So we do self dot apps. So this is defining a class variable apps. And then when we don't do self dot, we're calling a parameter. So we're setting self dot apps to the parameter value apps. And then we can self dot days since purchase. So this is creating a class variable called days since purchase and setting it to the parameter value days since purchase. And the same thing applies to the weight. So we're going to set it to that. So this will create our three variables: apps, days since purchase, and weight. So now let's create an instance of this phone, right? Let's call it iPhone 3, right? And we'll call it a phone. And before that, let's create a list of apps. So let's start with an apps list. So we'll call it apps underscore list, and we'll create a new list. So put your two brackets there, and we'll make it a list of strings so that these are app names. So we'll call one Candy Crush. We'll have Jetpack Joyride, settings, and App Store. So this phone has 4 apps on it, and inside of its apps list. So now we'll put these apps inside of our first parameter. So because we don't need to worry about self, we'll just put in the apps list, and this will make apps, the apps variable, be equal to this list over here. Now let's define a days since purchased. Actually, we don't need to define it. We're just defining the list first, and then we'll create a days since purchased. Let's say that this phone was purchased, let's say 3,467 days ago, because iPhone 3s are pretty old. And then we'll create a weight for this phone. We'll call it, let's say that it weighs 354 pounds, 0.34. That'll be mine. You can change yours to any value you want to. It really doesn't matter. You can also change your apps list to whatever you want. It again does not matter. It's just the concept. So now that we have this phone, we can check whether the iPhone has initialized correctly, right? So we'll create a print, and we'll just print out the apps that's inside of it, because the variable for the apps is self.apps. You can call iPhone3.apps. So then if we print out the apps, we should get Candy Crush, Jetpack Joyride, Settings, and App Store. Then if I print out the days since purchased, I should get 3,567. And if I print out the weight, I should get 354.4. And I do. So that's just normal stuff, and you've got your constructor done now. So you've created a constructor, you've passed in the variables, and you've created your class. Perfect. So now let's go on to the extra stuff. So we first want to create a method or a function which allows you to increment the days passed. So here's what we want to do. So we're going to want to start by creating our method. So let's call it def, and then we'll call it add to days since purchased. It's a long one. You guys can change it to something shorter. Just try to make it readable and don't make it too jargony. Don't just call your functions A and B. So then we need our self keyword to access our days since purchased value. And then we're going to need our, let's call it the let's call it increment value. So this is the amount we're going to change the days by. So what we'll do is we'll press enter, tab in, and we'll call self.days since purchased, and then we'll add, so plus equals, which adds and sets the variable to increment value. So now this if you have this function set up, this will take in the parameter and add it to days since purchase. Now all I have to do is I have to do iPhone3 dot add to days since purchased. Let's say we add on 1,000 more days, and I should get 4,567 if I print out days since purchase instead of weight. And over here we should get it. Whoa, okay, what's going on there? Oh, there you go. So now it's run, and you're getting 4,567. So if you guys are getting that, that's good. If you guys have any questions, just message me or somebody else in Paly Robotics. You can even give them your REPL. Then what you're going to do is you're going to want to, now we have our next thing that we need to do. We need to create two methods that allow us to add and remove apps from our phone. So this is a list, right? So what we can do is we can do append and we can do remove. And you know what? Let's make it so that we can input a list of apps so that we can add multiple apps at one time. So we can input a list and all those apps will be added to the apps list inside of our phone. So let's start with our def add apps. We'll call our self parameter, and let's say apps to add. So this is a list. So we're taking in a list. So let's say we want to add, what is it? Let's say we want to add REPL and GTA 5 to our apps list. All right, so this will be a list of two objects, and to loop through that and add that to our list, we're going to create a for loop that's going to have for, let's say, app in apps to add. So in our list, we're looping through that list, and then what we're doing is we're pretty much going to do is we're going to start by accessing self.apps. And this is referencing each string inside of that list. And we can just add we can just do dot append, and we can add that app to our apps. So that's looping through every single string in the list that we give it, and then it's adding those strings to our self.apps. So what we can do is that because right now we have Candy Crush, Jetpack Joyride settings in App Store. With this function, we can do iPhone 3 dot add apps. Inside of this, we can create a list. So put your parentheses, and then there's no self parameter, and then you create, and then for your apps to add, we create a list, and let's call it. Let's put inside of it. Let's have cut the rope. Let's put in. Remember that you can't put the comma inside of the string because then it'll be one string, and then it'll just be part of one string, not multiple objects. Then we'll have again GTA 5, and then we'll put in calendar. So now if I run this and print out our apps, you should have this. You should add these three objects, these three strings to our apps list. Let's test it out. Now in here, in our list, we have Candy Crush, Jetpack Joyride, Settings, App Store, Cut the Rope, GTA 5, and Calendar. Awesome. So that'll add multiple apps with one function into our list, so we don't need to call it multiple times. If we wanted to just add one app, we can just call a list of length 1, and we can just add Cut the Rope. So now this will work out fine. So let's say we want to now we want to remove things from our apps. So let's do the same thing as our add, and let's do it like a list. So we can call it remove apps, and we have our self keyword. Remember the self keyword, and we'll call it apps to remove. Then over here we'll tab in, and we can do the same thing as our add apps. So we'll create our for loop, which groups through the list of all the apps to remove, and it'll then it'll go through the list, and it'll use list.remove to remove that value from the list, from the apps list. So this, if I have a string, let's say I want to remove the apps Candy Crush and Jetpack Joyride, because I decided I wanted to be productive and not use my phone for games. So I want to remove them from my phone. And what this will do is that this should remove them from our phone. Oh no. I have an error. I misspelled Jetpack Joyride. So this should now remove them from our phone. So why is this? What's going on here? So we're looping through the list of Candy Crush and Jetpack Joyride, and the first one it gets is Candy Crush, and it removes Candy Crush from the list, and then it gets Jetpack Joyride, and it removes Jetpack Joyride from the list. It just does that too. It just does those two. And then you can, if those are misspelled, it'll give you an error because that thing doesn't exist in that list. So you just have to remember that those two are spelled correctly, and it should work out. And the same thing as the first one. Let's say I don't like my settings app anymore, and I just want to break my phone. I can also just remove one settings app, and then I can make it work, and then I'll remove settings from there. So are there any questions from this practice problem? I'll do this for the same thing. If not, if there are no problems, I'm going to move it to my colleague, my good chap, Nolan, to start presenting the project you guys are going to work on, like an independent problem. Okay, Nolan, you can.
All right. Okay, so we are going to make a library database project. That's a little complicated to explain, but let's start with the overview. So in the next few slides, you're going to make a book class, and then we're going to create a class called library, which stores books inside of it. and then it puts all those libraries in a list, and that's going to represent the library system. Okay, so first, we're going to need to create a class in order to save and organize all the specifics of each book. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to create the constructor. So make it take in the title of the book, the author, and the copyright date. And then also make a function in the book class that prints out all the facts about the book. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to do that. So go ahead. If you need any help, message any one of us Paly Robotics people. All right, how's everybody doing on this one? In 2 minutes, I'm going to go over how to actually do it. So it's okay if you don't fully understand it. But just a status check on everybody would help me understand how I can adjust my speed. All right, I'm going to go over it now. So we're going to create a class to save and organize the specifics of each book. Okay, so what does that mean? Oops. So I'm going to essentially create a class that will represent the book. So, oops, let me just clear this out first. So class book equal. We want the constructor to take in some specifics, right? So we need to take in the title of the book, the author, and the copyright date. So title, author, copyright date. Okay, so notice how I put those in as parameters into the constructor, as variables in the constructor. So then all we're going to do is, I'm sorry, that's in the wrong spot. Def init. And then we put that in there. And we also put in self, title, author, copyright. This should be that. Okay, so what does this do? Well, this is the constructor, okay? So we're going to essentially make sure that we assign the right value. So self.title equals title. Self.author equals author. We are filling in the blanks here. Okay, and so this is the book class, and I misspelled that. So we also want a function that prints out all the values. So we do def print vals, or what are we going to call it? Get print facts. And we're just gonna, all we're gonna do is we're gonna just, we're gonna need it to take in self, so that way it can access these variables. And we're gonna print out self.title, or sorry, print self.title, print self.author, and print self.copyright. Okay, now we're going to test this, right? So, we're going to create a new book, book 1 equals book. And we're going to put in the name. So we're going to put in title. Let's say title is title. Author is author. This is just a test. And copyright is copyright. And then we're going to call book1.print facts. And we run this, and it should print out title, author, copyright. We run it. I forgot to call the parentheses, or add parentheses to actually call the function. And it calls title, author, copyright. Okay. Does this make sense? Anybody need any clarification? I know the self bit can be a little confusing. Think of it as saying, which fill in the blank are we referring to? Oh, we're referring to this one that we're putting in. So when we say self.title, we're saying this title, this specific instance's title is title, etc., etc. It's what's given. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I'm going to move on. Creating an input method. We're going to create a constructor that creates and returns the new book based on input. So we're going to say book name, author name, copyright date equals input. What is the name of the book, author's name, and copyright date dot split? I'm just going to take this code and paste it in. And I'll explain what it does in a brief moment. And so this actually allows us to skip the constructor completely because we're getting user input here. So if we actually run this, whoops, that's not quite correct. Okay, so now let me explain what this chunk of code does. So you see this little prompt here, this pop-up. So instead of passing it in the constructor, we're going to simply ask the user, what is the name of the book, author's name, and copyright date. And we're doing this. I'm going to paste this code into chat, but it is a handy way of getting multiple inputs. So this dot split here splits it into three different variables, which then go to title, author, and copyright. So if I actually run this, what is the name of the book, author's name, and copyright date? Let's say Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, and copyright date. I don't know when it was. Let's say 1999. I added commas. I shouldn't have done that. Let's try that again. Harry Potter, copyright date, author is J.K. Rowling. So in this case, you're going to have to do it all in one word. It's a little unfortunate. And then the copyright date is 1999. Enter, and it prints out these values. If you wanted to make it split, so this is splitting on a space, okay? It's a little complex, but basically what split does is it sees every space and splits it based on that. So if I change this to instead this, I can now do Harry Potter, comma, J.K. Rowling, comma, and 1999. And that should, see, that allows us to write multiple things. So you want to add in a comma in the parentheses here, comma space. Basically what this does, again, is it splits the string into three strings, okay? So it sees Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, 1999 as a string, and then it sees each comma, and then splices it there. Splicing means cut. So it cuts it there, and then it gives us three different variables, which we can then use. I know this is pretty complicated, so you can keep it the previous way, but this is a really nice way to get interface from the user. Any questions on this? Right, okay. Moving on. Now we're gonna make a library class, and we want it to essentially be, you have your library, and it's gonna have a list of books, and it's gonna have a name. And then the list of books should contain a bunch of books. So it looks kind of like this with all its list of books. So let us try this out. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, you should try and declare your methods and classes above at the very top. So class library. Oops. Def init self. And what else is it going to take in, guys? It's going to take in a name. And what else? All right. Well, we'll just start out with a name then, I guess. Def init name. So self.name equals name. So this saves the name. Now, what else do we want? We want a what do you call it? List of books. So self.books equals, and we're going to assign this to a blank empty list. So we don't actually need to take in an input. We're just assigning a variable self.books to something that's already given. So self.name is saying this instance's name is going to be the given input name. So, but we don't need an input for the list of books because it's just an empty list. Okay, so now that we have this, let's create a method that adds books to the list. So def add book. Books.append book, undefined name books. So I forgot something very important. I forgot self, and I forgot to say self.books. Because if I didn't have that self, it wouldn't know what books I'm talking about. So it says self.books. Oh, okay, I see, I have books. And then I can append in the book that I want. Okay, so let's try. Let's try adding that book. So lib.add book 1. And that is the wrong function, so it should be add book 1. And let's try this again. Okay, what is the name of the book? Author's name and copyright date: Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, 1999. Okay, missing one positional required argument. I forgot to put in the name. What's the name going to be? I'm going to say Rinconada Library. Okay, so name of the book, Harry Potter. Author's name, J.K. Rowling, 1999. Okay, and so you see it actually adds the book. We haven't done anything with it, but it adds the book. You can tell because we haven't had an error. Okay, so we're going to create a method add book. We already did that. And we're going to create a method called get facts. So method get facts, def get facts. And it's going to take in a position in the array, okay? So it's going to take in a position in books. Let's say pause. And then we're going to use that self.books at pause dot. And so this gets the book. So it takes a look at books, says, okay, which one's at the one at position? And at this position. And then we're going to write it. We're going to print out the facts. So we're going to do print facts. And it does not like self because I haven't passed it in. So that's what we need to do. And so if I run lib.getFacts, it should print out the facts about the book. So let me remove that one so that you can see what happened. So author, name of the book, Harry. Let's just simplify this. HP, oops. Let's run that again. HP, JK, and 1999. Okay, and see it prints it out here when we run lib.getFacts. So I'm going to leave the last leg of this to you guys. I want you to create a list of libraries, okay? And in that list, you should have different books, you should have different books and an array of libraries in the list. So you should have a list of libraries, and inside each library there should be a list of books, okay? And so if that's about it. So if you feel inclined to find a better way to input data, I would recommend looking into files as inputs. I'll show you my code, and I'd like you to finish up and create a list of libraries that will have a list of libraries, and inside each library there will be a list of books. Okay? So I'll give you guys 10 minutes to complete that. So just a refresher, we're going to make a list of multiple libraries, and then we're going to put in books inside of the libraries using the add book method. So here, let me type that out so that you guys have a good reminder. So you're going to you are going to have a list of libraries, and in each library, using the add book function, you should have a list of books. Okay, So yeah, 10 minutes. Take your time. If you need help, ask us. How do you fix it? Can you be a little more specific with that? Okay. So for the sake of time, at 4:50, I will show you how to do it. All right, I'm going to go over this real quick. So, how are we going to make a list of books inside a library and then put that library inside a list? Well, first you have to start out by creating a list. We already have a list of books in the library by the class has that. So all we need to do is just make a list of books. So library list equals new list. And then we can just simply go around. So let's create some new libraries. Library 1, library 2, okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create a bunch of books. We're going to add book 1. We're going to add these books. And then we're going to add the libraries to the library list. And that should be the code. So if I run this, let's give it some fun values. Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling. That's the one we started out with. And 1999. Okay. And then we're inputting the next book. So let's say Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, 1960 something. That should take in the books. I forgot to call book on that. I'm not going to go through this again, retype it out, so I'm just going to fill it in with some random values for now. Okay, and now we've created a list of libraries. And so they're stored successfully in liblist. So if I do liblist 0, that's the first list, dot what was it? Print facts. Dot get facts 0. This will print out the first book. A, B, C. Okay. That's it for today's session. If there are any questions, I'd highly advise you guys to ask the other Paly Robotics members. I'll keep this up for a bit. Let me know if I should scroll up or down or anything for you guys. But yeah, feel free to leave now if you feel like you understand it all. And thank you all for coming. So we really appreciate it, and we really appreciate that you're willing to learn this. Okay, so thank you all for coming. Goodbye.